It's 9 o'clock, and welcome to Glimpse of the Future Online. We've got a great lineup for you today. We have 4 wonderful presentations. I'm looking forward to introducing you to the group. But before we get started, a couple housekeeping points. Please put questions into the QA section of Zoom, and then the speaker, if he has time, can address them during his session. Or we can take all questions at the end. After the 4th session, we'll leave the Zoom session open and take as many questions as we can. There's also 3 polls to comment on, so please do participate in those. One of the polls has just been put on the screen now, so you can answer that in your whenever you like during the next hour. A bit about the Glimpse Initiative. As more people with know-how leave the workforce, they're trying to monetize their knowledge through software. And what we're seeing in the market is just a tsunami of innovation. People developing software, trying to support themselves and share what they've learned in the industry over many years. And what's happened is there are so many vendors and so many wonderful tools out there that are just getting swamped by this wave. And with Glimpse of the Future, we're finding the best of them and verifying them through customer case studies, and then making them available to our audience through 15-minute presentations. We ran 5 face-to-face Glimpse of the Future events last year, and this is our 2nd online event. First one being yesterday, and thank you for so many of you who are returning from yesterday's event. Future events will be grouped by area of interest. The areas we're looking at are project control, cost, and BIM. The feedback that I've been getting is that we need to segment by area of interest. So please, if you are aware of any case studies that you find particularly interesting, vendors that just absolutely rock your world, we want to know about them, and we want to help share their stories out there to improve the construction industry and make the world a better place. So let me introduce our first speaker, which is Dr. DJ Gibbs with Gammon Construction. And DJ is a digital and engineering compliance manager. He gained his doctorate in BIM and dispute resolution and has advised governments, public bodies, and organizations on the development and assurance of information requirements internationally. DJ has a proven success record of preparing winning proposals and methodologies, delivering technical requirements, and maintaining client relationships at the highest level. He has also been appointed by not-for-profit organizations to facilitate cross-industry engagement and provide independent opinion on infrastructure innovation. DJ has worked on building, infrastructure, industrial, oil and gas, and power and utility disputes ranging from several thousand to multi-billion dollars. He draws on his deep knowledge of the lessons learned to demonstrate how digital ways of working can address common challenges, and he regularly presents, peer reviews, and publishes work on associated opportunities and risks. Let me turn it over to my good friend, DJ Gibbs in Hong Kong.
Cheers, Phil. Wow, what a welcome. Let me just share my screen with you guys. So, is this coming through all right? So, hi everyone, and yeah, welcome to my presentation, and thank you, Phil, for having me at this at your Glimpse event, and to, I guess, kind of learn more about these products, and also I guess share some of my experiences. Yeah, for those of you that don't know me, so I'm David John, or DJ as most people call me, and I started my digital journey back in 2011. At that point in time, I'd never really worked on a digital project. I graduated as a civil engineer, and I was working for a highways contractor, just doing a lot of road maintenance. And I went on this website called findaphd.com, and there was believe it or not, and there was a doctorate advertised in BIM and dispute resolution. I'd never been involved in BIM, I'd never been involved in disputes, but I'd always liked construction management. And I went to the interview and I got the gig. And over 5 years, I worked for an organization that specialized in dispute resolution as part of their delay team, and was researching at the same time what the benefits of BIM might bring. So that was both reducing the likelihood of dispute, so assisting with claims preparations or just better projects in general, but also when disputes do occur, how you can use data or information to reduce, to, I guess, stop them costing as much and to get the outcome that you're looking for. So I've been quite fortunate, and as Phil mentioned, I started back then and really in the world of disputes, and now I moved more into an advisory space on not just how to avoid claims and disputes, but actually working for a contractor now and looking at embedding digital ways of working into our common practices. So I'm particularly looking at working with the legal team, looking at we've moved them into the cloud, and looking at how we improve working with our external consultants, as well as working with the project teams. So, and embedding digital ways. So I'm particularly passionate about 4D modeling and 5D modeling, and part of my role is embedding that across the whole business. But everything and anything to do, particularly with construction management around time and money, is where I get involved. The presentation I'm going to give today is really focused on three main things. So the first being the storage of information. And as I go through, I'll introduce some tales or perhaps horror stories that really exemplify the importance of storing and capturing, or actually the importance of all of these things. So firstly is storing and capturing that information. Two is then looking at managing that information. Once we've got it, what can we do with it? And then finally, it's understanding. Before I actually had this as presenting, but I think it's a bit less than presenting, a bit more than presenting and reporting. I think it's about understanding that information, so then you can make, I guess, better decisions or problem solve better. Now, all of this, from all my time in disputes, really, I pin it down to a bit of a jigsaw puzzle. So first thing is, what pieces have we got? When it comes to disputes, not all the pieces are in the box. So you've got to find the different pieces. You don't always have all the straight edges. So the next bit is, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to put those different pieces together to then finally build up a bigger picture so you can actually see what's happening on that project? Obviously, from a project controls point of view, this is on a minute by minute, day by day, month by month basis. Retrospectively, it's a bit easier because you have all that information, well, not always easier, but you have all that information. In a project controls environment, it's about how you can grab all these pieces, put them together, and understand what's happening on that project at a point in time. So first things first, really the storage of information. And when it comes to dispute resolution, anybody that's attended dispute talks has probably heard the term records. Fact is king when it comes to resolving disputes, and it comes down to having records of what happened at certain points in time. Now, to try and help put this into perspective a little bit, the roles of dispute professionals, imagine your construction projects, whatever you're working on or may have worked on in the past, and how over time it's accumulated more information or data, records, whatever you want to call it, over time. So if you're working on, I don't know, a building project, stadium, hospital, let's say, it's taken 3 years to build. You've got lots of different stakeholders producing lots of different pieces of information and collating that over time. And their knowledge on that project has developed considerably as part of their involvement. When it comes to disputes, you get parachuted in. You've never worked on the project before. So you have a quick learning curve there. You don't know how all this information comes together. Now, one of the projects we worked on, we were dumped 28, and this is before I worked at Gammon, sorry, went as a dispute consultant. I was dumped with 28 terabytes worth of data. So this is a project that had been running for multiple years. Its first language wasn't English as well, I should emphasize. And 28 terabytes of data, my colleague at the time calculated, is enough paper to fill the White House twice over. So you're looking at, if you were to print all of this information and try and understand all of this information, because you haven't been able to accumulate and understand that going along the project, you've got to digest enough paper that can fit into the White House 2 times. Now, that's a lot of data and a lot of information you need to get your head around. But conversely, at the same time, I've worked on projects where you've got pieces of paper and people have written on pieces of cardboard. They've ripped up a bit of the spray paint boxing, put down a record and hole punched it, and it's actually gone into a file. So we've got kind of two ends of the spectrum here. And more often than not, what will happen is you'll get dumped lots and lots of emails. So the main source of communication, or records, as we like to say, has come from email correspondence. So much so with when it comes to adjudications, you'll get boxes and boxes of emails sent to the office. So it wouldn't be surprised if there's 20 boxes of paper, they're against a wall in the office. If you walk down Chancery Lane in London, you'll see barristers' clerks pushing trolleys of paper to the legal, to the courts. So we're very paper heavy. We enjoy printing a lot. And actually, although, like I said, with the 28 terabytes, we may have lots of information, actually how that information is put together is often unwieldy. So we might have, in a physical sense, what might happen is you have lots of people that print lots of paper and they go to put it in the filing room. And it's the same as just throwing that paper in that room, constantly throwing that paper in the room. It's not structured in any way, which means when it comes to finding information, it can be very, very difficult. Now, reports state that engineers spend up to 20% of their time searching for information. So out of a 5-day working week, they spend a whole day just looking for information, which really shows how important it is to store information properly. Because not only when it comes to the end of the project, trying to find that. So for individuals like what I used to do when it comes to disputes, helping resolve them, but from the proactive management of the project, all of this information isn't centralized in any place. And adding to that, more often than not, a lot of the information is just what I would class as electronic paper. It's a PDF of text that's not searchable. So when you want to find certain key terms and so forth, it can be very, very difficult to track down that item. And you really need to rely on certain people to find it. Now, with outbreaks like COVID, unfortunately, a lot of members of the construction workforce are being laid off, but we're relying on those individuals to have that information in their head. So when that link gets lost, whether they leave the business or they maybe even move on to another role, it can be particularly difficult to find that information. And we also need to consider keeping that information secure and also giving people remote access, like how we're operating at the moment. Now, that's very technology driven, and we have lots of softwares that are able to help that. And some of the products that you'll hear talking today offer solutions around, or part of their solutions assist with the storage of this information. It helps with centralizing it so project teams can pull out the information as they need it to make their decisions. And also you have central repositories so you can pull out the information whenever it is at the project. So it might not necessarily be needed at that point in time, but you might need to look back a week, a month, a year, sometimes 7, 10 years, whatever it might be, to gain that insight. And that's not just at project level, but that goes across programs and portfolios as well. Taking it a little step beyond just the software, we also need the rigor around managing information. So like I said, it's not enough just to throw and dump information into these rooms. We need to have some structure around that. And by way of example, in a disputes context, the first dispute I ever worked on, they were building a city out in Qatar. It was, well, as you can imagine, very, very expensive, lots and lots going on. The challenge was they had records, they were storing records, like I said, but they couldn't pinpoint exactly what those records meant in points in time. So for way of example, it wasn't possible for the contractor, it was at the time, to tell you how many tower cranes they had on a job on a specific day. So when it came to a dispute, they found it very difficult to say. And that's something as big as tower cranes, let alone other pieces of plant and equipment, or any other testing and commissioning, any other kind of certification details that were needed, say for concrete tests, let's say. Now that's very tricky, because when it comes to running the project, how can the people actually manage that in order to get on top of that information? So we went through a process of semi-automating that. And similarly, the products that you'll see today assist with that semi-automation. It's about putting information in once and being able to use it multiple times so you can slice and dice it to gain that insight on your projects in a live environment. You need to have some structure around that in terms of things like process of how you're going to name your files, how they're going to, like I said, be stored or shared in a secure way. But most definitely important to keep that information, store it, and then manage it so it can be found a lot easier. And then finally, from me, we go on to understanding that information. Now, they often call delay analysis the black art. A lot of delay analysis can be difficult to understand, and it can be very, very tricky for individuals that aren't in Gantt charts day to day to get to the bottom of what's actually being communicated. That's no different with Gantt charts on projects in a live environment. And while the Gantt chart's a very useful tool, it's not always the best way for presenting communicating exactly what's going on in the project. Individuals learn in different ways. We have some visual learners, some are oral, some are read-write, and others are kinesthetic, the doers. That's how they understand. And actually, we should go about, in my opinion, how we communicate this information in different platforms, in different ways, so different individuals can understand that. So as I mentioned at the start, I'm a massive advocate of 4D modeling, so linking 3D models to construction programs so you can see progress over time. But as you'll see today, there's other presenters that show different ways of presenting this information, particularly where Gantt charts can be difficult to understand. So repetitive works and linear works don't always lend themselves to how the Gantt chart is presented. And I think it's a really, really great product that we'll see in terms of a different way of digesting the same pieces of information. So everybody's on that same page. Finally, from me, is just a little piece on the future. I spoke a little bit about how projects go wrong and really what some of the tools are good for understanding and storing, managing and sharing that information. But really, where are we heading? And a lot of people talk about digital twins, which is what I'm trying to represent here. And there's a lot of unknowns there. But really, it starts with the data. The most important thing is that we're creating data or information in a structured format, and we're linking it and presenting it in ways that is most digestible. Now, this isn't just in the construction phase. The idea is that we have this information ready, so it's suitable for operations and asset management. But without these tools and technologies and the processes that we're going to adopt, we're not going to be able to meet these future requirements that we're looking for in terms of the digital twin. So my note to the audience is many of you will be at different stages of your digital journey. I would say, pay particular attention to some of the softwares that are coming up today and other ones that are out there in the market as well, because it's not going away. Digital ways of working are very important. They're imperative to how we can deliver efficiently, particularly in a post-COVID environment. So stay tuned, enjoy the presentations by the other presenters, and if you have any questions, please don't feel free to contact me. Thank you.
Thank you, DJ. That was great. It's so important to keep good records, and you're just a leader in that area. And I just want to thank you so much for joining the event today and sharing your thoughts. Are we going to show the results of the last poll at this point? Yes, okay. So, without a doubt, coronavirus pandemic has increased adoption and accelerated adoption. I'm hearing stories of decisions being made in days that would normally have taken months. So let's move right on to our next speaker. So this is a really exciting case study. Okay. Sorry, we're going to have another poll here. What is your role in the industry? Please tell us why you're here and what you do. Right, so moving on to our next speaker, I'm really excited to have this case study with Mark Heath. It's about how AECOM used UniPhi to ease congestion in Sydney. Learn how distributed data capture helped the client control complex projects and large programs. UniPhi is a multiple award-winning software business spun out of MBH in 2013. Its core web-based product is a portfolio and project manager software system used mainly in the built environment for both construction and infrastructure projects and businesses. Mark is the founder and sole director of UniPhi. His role is to provide the direction for future development, sales, marketing activities, as well as direct support to the clients. And during the past 12 months, this means working directly on projects worth over 40 billion pounds, 40 billion Australian dollars. Most current projects are Melbourne Metro, West Sydney Airport, easing Sydney congestion. Welcome, Mark. Let me hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Phil. Just share my screen. And yeah, thanks a lot for the opportunity to come along and present today. I think the platform that you've got with Glimpse of the Future is fantastic. The concept of bringing new tech into the construction industry and getting awareness across the industry about what's coming up, and the other presenters and the range of stuff that's coming on board is really exciting. For me, having been involved in it for quite some time now, it's really interesting to see the adoption and the way that people are looking at it in greater detail than, say, even 5 years ago. So my topic today is about distributed data capture, excuse me, and how we have this sort of concept, this hypothesis that distributed data capture can, just get my video working, how distributed data capture can manage complexity. And so that's basically the topic of this concept, and in the context of a real life example in the way we supported that Easing Sydney Congestion program. Bit about us first though, and I think Phil's introduction was brilliant. It basically covered that already. So yeah, we had a parent company consultancy that we spun out this product in 2012 and really went live in 2013. So it's been around for a while. It's a web-based platform product. Portfolio and program and project management is its focus, but it distributes the data capture to people who are active team members on projects. We have 9,000 active users logging in every day around 30 countries, but the predominant is Australia and New Zealand. However, we're now looking at and have been focused into these other 30 countries in the last 6 months, in particular the UK. And hence it's a great opportunity to present to you guys today. And as Phil mentioned, the number fluctuates as some come online and some come off, but we've been hovering around $30 to $40 billion of infrastructure spend that we're supporting for the last 4 or 5 years, actually. And obviously we're supporting millions more in building projects around the country. So this specific topic, Easing Sydney Congestion, is an umbrella program with 3 main sub-programs underneath. It's fairly sizable. We're looking at clearways, bus lanes, pinch point relief, and some other collection of programs. The overall spend is about 4.2 billion Australian dollars. And the complexity comes in from the fact that they're all brownfield sites and there's lots of them. So the projects themselves are quite small, but they're quite complex in that you're dealing with an existing infrastructure that you've got to manage. The stakeholders that are around that infrastructure need to be managed. And not only that, the projects themselves weren't known when the program kicked off, and they're still not known in terms of their entirety. So the program is constantly expanding in new projects, and it has a process to identify those and to select them. So the program is emerging over time. And when you have emergence and you have complexity in scope and a lot of issues coming from left field, that's when you have a real ideal scenario for our software. And so what we brought to the table was a distributed data capture model that basically enables people to collaborate every day on the work that they're actually doing. And then from a program and controls perspective, you can just sort of peer in and aggregate and cut and dice. And DJ's sort of presentation around that structure and data structure was quite interesting for me, because that's pretty much what we're coming to the table with. So our emphasis in this example is activity-based support, supporting people to do activities that potentially weren't known about when the project started, or at least what you need to do. The steps are pretty well defined, but what you're going to encounter when you go through those steps is completely unknown. And so we need to be able to share, you know, if there's a utilities issue on a brownfield site, or something that particularly throws a curveball at you on what is a basic activity normally if it was greenfield. And the implications of getting all of that data into the system is that we can then start to use analytics and AI to potentially give earlier warnings to senior management and to the senior stakeholders in government to be aware of certain issues and how they can be addressed earlier than we normally would. And so to put that in a graphical context, this diagram shows how UniPhi will allow direct data entry from various stakeholders. Up the top here, we've got people who are like designing drawings and managing projects and coming up with new specifications, a new scope of works, etc. Then we've got people in the field capturing directly into the application as well through mobile apps and through other web application type direct data entries on tablets. Then we'll also pull data from other systems that are being used, which could be email, it could be schedules, it could be estimates, and pull that data into our application as well as a REST API, dynamically, basically, without any extraction and cleaning and transforming and massaging and basically worrying about where that audit trail is. We want complete audit trail back to source. And if we get these three sections around the right here successful, and we get all that data, that's what we want as much data as we can get. You can then get the geeks to get on board and analyze all that data in interesting ways, and then ultimately we can develop algorithms that will machine learn. And the thing about machine learning is that it'll end up telling you things that you didn't know without you actually knowing how it did it. So even though you've written the algorithm and you've taught the computer how to teach itself, it will then find patterns within data and will spring up things that you never knew existed. Now, that's still a work in progress for us at the moment, but that's where we're going. Oh, I've gone too far there. So now what I want to do is just show you a little bit about the product itself. And while I'm doing my first bit, I'll just do a bit of that to wake everything back up again. And so this is our application. And what you're looking at here is a subset portfolio within that application, a couple of projects, and they've got their children projects, which in this easing Sydney congestion was done as stage gates. And you can kind of see how that gets represented in this drop-down list here. So I'm accessing this through Chrome. You can access it on any web browser, and hence the distributed data, access anywhere kind of concept. And so with this structure here, you can see there's two projects in the list, and each project has a stage gating a sub-project, if you like, that they need to work through to get to the next stage. And as I mentioned in the PowerPoint, what we wanted to do is capture the real everyday task information. And you'll see on the sub-nav here, there's a tasks section. And when I go to that section, you'll see there's different types of tasks. Now, some of these are standard, and they cookie-cutted this approach and developed a really robust process for going through each stage gate. And they're the standard tasks. And each standard task, like this drainage design, has a bunch of subtasks associated with it. And then you'll have issues as well. And the good thing about this is that when you log these things, the interface is the same. And so and you'll see within here, we've got people assigned to them, they've got due dates, and if they log in, they'll get their work and what they need to do and by when. And if they click on these particular activities, all of the sub-activities are listed there. You get a whole heap of metadata around this particular activity as well. That's data that describes data. And in this particular instance, as it's a design document, we've got conversations going on here, but we've also got a link to the actual latest revision of the drawing. So it's, again, about that managing of data and structuring data so that you can access it quickly. That 1 day a week is what we're really trying to crunch down in terms of finding information. And so that's an example of a standard task. And then we've got an issue. We've got an early warning due to possible cultural items, probably something more relevant to Australian listeners than the UK perhaps, but there's a little bit of a gag in here if you can get it. And so this one, we've copied sort of NEC. They weren't using NEC on this project, but you can use NEC, early warning, tracking in this application and align the whole system to an NEC contract. You've got actions again with different people participating. We have site photos taken on board where, as this is a cultural relic thing, we've got toilet paper that was secured in the COVID environment for the future being found on site, and it's now a relic. We've also got deserted streets that represent that. So the system will strip out GPS, which is great for roads programs, and tell you where you took that photo. We've got comments coming in from people randomly directly into the application, but we're also sucking in emails. And so again, DJ mentioned all the email traffic that is so common. We're trying to reduce that by having conversations here directly, but also understanding that it exists. And you just pull emails in directly from Outlook without needing to manipulate or do anything challenging around that. And you contextualize it to what that email is trying to do. In this instance, the early warning around a possible culture. And we're really promising not to blow up that cultural site. And so that, if you imagine that happening, we've got 200 in AECOM's Easing Sydney Congestion team. The design team was 200 people, 125 full-time equivalents working every day in that program full-time. And you've got all of them piling into here and adding comments and collaborating. And what you get is just a plethora of data. And so this example here, because what we've also got around those activities is timesheets. We've got rates against resources. We've got resource plans. We've got milestones and percentage completes against earned value tracking. And so you put all that in and you start to build aggregate reports. And this was a bit of a classic one for them. This was a report for post-contract work where we were analysing how long it took them to respond to requests for information from a contractor. And so we were able to tell a lot more information than they normally be able to get because of the integration of all of those data points. So we had number of responses they needed, what the total cost was, total hours spent, the cost per issue, the cost per, the hours spent per issue. And this trended over time. And so the red line is costs, the blue is how many were raised, the black is how many were resolved, sorry, other way around. And if I click on those links, and you'll see that the other data updates, and one of them includes a list of the actual issues. So again, it's integrating this data, which I can click on, takes me back into that same sort of environment that we had before with actions, comments. And so long as people are pouring those comments into the system, we should be able to get to the bottom of any of those disputes and what has actually occurred on that job, because everyone's putting that in on the day-to-day basis, including daily diaries and things like that, that would have things like craneage and how many were on site and who was on site, and various other things like that. And of course, it doesn't end there. This system, once you get it, you can aggregate into all types of reporting. So that we're using Power BI as a visualization tool here, but you've got to understand it plugs directly in. There's no ETL, there's no extraction, transforming, loading, and building this up. And so once you've got that, you can look at integrated progress. We've got S-curves, we've got issues, full-blown dashboards with geolocation around budgets, risks, timelines, how many hours people are spending, safety issues, which again can be drilled back into the specific incident that happened that caused one of those minor injuries to occur. That's showing you there on the screen as 37 in the year. So that type of interaction between the detail and the higher level is really what we're looking for. And then we take it one step further again. And in this particular, sorry, I've just got the Zoom buttons in the road. This one here. This is where we're starting on the AI journey. And so what this has done is, just to simplify for your head how it works, is it strips out all of the comments into single words and then it counts them. And then we haven't stripped out all of the pronouns and everything else, but that's what would happen in the algorithm. And we're looking at words that happen a lot. And so in this example, we've got the word the 109 times. And so from that, we can pattern match to a project that's gone off the rails to one that's performed well, and what words were used in conversation through that activity module to be able to generate the AI elements to this. And so taking that back into my presentation, on this particular case study, in a 12-month period, this is just 12 months, the program is still ongoing, but it's been going for 4 years. You had 339 projects that were initiated or had some progress on them. They had 3 design stages. They had 12 standard steps per design stage, 6 activities, sub-activities. So you would have seen in the activity structure how that worked. And then you had at least an average of 4 comments. So you look at that, and that's 291,000 data points in that schedule, basically. 291,000 discrete data points. However, then you wrap a whole heap of metadata around it, the amount of time spent, who did that time, their role, how that compared to the expected time they were going to have on that project, and that activity. And you end up with 582 million combinations of data that you can analyze, which to a big data person looking at AI, this is the thing. And you look at Tesla, they're teaching cars to drive by collecting data of people driving. We're trying to apply the same thing in projects. Let's get the people who are driving the project to tell us how they're going every day and use that data to see what we can find. And as an example as well, that was 5.8 million words to count individually and categorize and start to tailor. So the implications from a project controls perspective, we can look at how many times date changes, the variations per RFI, benchmarking durations, and have feedback loop into future projects, cost per activity, per other class of metadata. So the usual stuff, but you know that you've got full audit trail back to the source data. But then the extended stuff is in the AI around word pattern matching for early warning, past performance predicting future performance, data cleansing. Are people really just bagging and dumping time, or is it accurate? And we compare that by looking at timesheet data versus task activity and duration. And then obviously also a potential around optimal portfolio selection. So what this means is that new technologies are allowing for live connections to distributed data systems. So not ETL, not having to put it into a spreadsheet first and send it to someone to load into a data warehouse. It's live, it's connected. That gives us deep data sets. We do this by streamlining the collection of activity, by enabling the people doing the work to get benefits out of putting information into our system. And it really does contrast to a closed system where you've got a smaller group of people pouring information into a P6 schedule or something similar. They're getting that data from third parties, and that there's no direct link there, and that's the issue. We need to get it as a living organism, as something that's got everyone on the one platform piling that information in. So if you want to know more, Brian Cairns is our direct agent in the UK. His mobile phone's there, and email, or you can call or email me, or you can check out our software on our website. It has more case studies there and other information about what we've been doing. So yeah, thanks a lot. I saw there's some questions coming in. I'll leave them for the end, I guess, Phil.
That was great. What a tour de force. Data that describes data. That's what it's all about, isn't it? Yeah. I have to tell you, I thought that was absolutely great. So we have the results of the next poll, and interesting. Consultants and technology providers are even. Okay. Okay, super. No, I was very impressed, Mark, I've got to say. This is really something else. I love the natural language processing and the word count features, and it's one of the best tools I've seen for data aggregation. Okay, we've got our next poll. Post-COVID-19, how do you feel funding for innovation will be affected? Less funding available, stay the same, more funding available. I think I'm going to say, well, I won't tell you what I'm going to say. There we go. Right, so I'm very excited to announce Brian King, our next speaker, who I've known for many years. So his company's AfterPremise, and the APDoc solution delivers complete and comprehensive documentation for the most complex of projects through intelligent automation, flexible workflows, and robust storage on the AWS platform. A simple pay-per-use pricing model, paying only for what you use, not for the number of users, while providing accessibility for contractors, subcontractors, and third parties as needed without any additional license costs to the project. Brian and I worked together at Oracle in what is now known as the Engineering Construction Business Unit. In his market development role, Brian was instrumental in defining the solution mix for the construction phase of the London 2012 Olympics, as well as several other large initiatives globally. Thank you. Brian, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Phil. I'll just see if I can start my video. Nope, not yet. Okay. I just can't start my video at the moment, but I'll just go in and do that.
Start with share your screen.
Yeah, sure. Just in 1 second. Okay, should start to see me on video now.
One more thing, while my mic is hot,
Here we are.
I just want to encourage people to put questions to Mark on that absolutely red hot presentation in UniPhi. Please let us get your questions. Right, over to you, Brian.
Okay, can everyone see my presentation and hear me okay?
We can see PowerPoint, yes.
Fantastic. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. Thanks, Phil. I'm going to talk a little bit about, since it's a glimpse for the future, can we take a little glimpse into the future and think about what we might see coming up our way? And to do that, inevitably, I'm going to talk about the cloud. But I'm going to differentiate the cloud usage. I'm going to pigeonhole people who've sort of moved their current architecture and basically are now just renting servers on the cloud. And then I'm going to move forward for a further glimpse of people who have sort of taken a moment to think about what the cloud might bring and thought about how they might throw the rulebook away. Because I actually think we need to throw the rulebook away in construction. I think, you know, just the low adoption of technology within construction, something's holding people back, and it's easy to sort of have a pop at construction folk, but you know, anyone that I've met that works in construction, they're fairly gung-ho, they're up for new ideas, they're up to try new things. So there's something still getting in the way. And so I'm going to tell you a story over 15 minutes. It has to be a short story. And I'm going to use a couple of quotes to help me on my way.
Brian, I hate to interrupt you, but we're seeing presenter view. So if you went to your display settings and changed the monitor, then I think you'd be all set. Yes,
right.
I'm live now. There you go.
Thank you. I'm
no, I think you want. Yep, you're all sorted. Thank you.
You're a star. Thank you, Phil. So I'm going to tell you. I'm going to use two quotes to tell you a bit of a story. My first quote is one of my favorites. It's from Isaac Newton, and you know, he just acknowledged that, you know, he used other folks' work to come up with his sort of thoughts on gravity. You know, you can't work in isolation. And he talked about standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think that's what we need to do. I think, you know, we looked out when we went to try and build this product. We looked for a big friendly giant. And, you know, we settled on Amazon. We settled on Amazon AWS. Because for me, they've really revolutionized the way we do retail globally. They seem to be able to stand up a product that's available 24/7, and it just deals with things like Black Friday without them really breaking into a sweat. And I've been lucky in looking at Amazon and going to Amazon gigs that they've sort of introduced me to a few people who have really jumped all in and not just moved servers across, but really stopped, thrown the rulebook away and rethought how they were going to do things. And my two favorites are Netflix and something called the DVLA. So if you're not in the UK, DVLA is the government organization that looks after all driver and vehicle licensing in the UK. You know, imagine Netflix, you know, we're talking about a glimpse into the future, but hey, what if you're a content provider and hey, someone decided that most of the world had to be locked down for a while and we're looking around to consume box sets and stuff? Well, yeah. Unsurprisingly, Netflix have been able to cope with that and cope with that quite easily. So the disruption in their marketplace, they've been able to cater for. But Netflix really knocked the ball out of the park. If you listen to what they're doing, they do really clever stuff. You know, they don't actually have a server on their estate that's more than a month old. They run around the server deliberately deleting servers so that it stands up new instances. You think, oh, well, why would you do that? Because they've thought out of the box here. Thought, well, if we can do this and it's easy, we never patch a server. We don't spend time with security patches. All of our servers are always the latest ones and up to date. And similarly with the DVLA, you know, if you don't know the UK car market, we have these sort of registration plate changes, and it makes people wait for a registration. So we have these peaks of purchasing and new licensing. So they have to quickly deal with lots of new vehicles coming on the road, and then they've sort of looked at the whole thing and said, actually, we're putting more and more of these services online because we can infinitely scale and then reduce back down. And it makes it very easy for them. So I think I'm going to talk about, as we glimpse into the future, cloud. The other things we liked was the storage. The storage is easy. The service level agreements Amazon give us means, you know, for every 10,000 documents we store, We might lose a document once every 10 million years. Well, you know, I can live with that. And it's quite cheap. You know, it's really cheap. So we just decided that we're going to store every version of every document that everyone gives us, because we can afford to do it. And similarly with database records, you know, it automatically writes a database record to two data centers, and I can restore data to any point in time in the last 35 days without doing anything. That's just comes out of the box, which means, of course, for me, that means we can concentrate on other things. We're not managing our infrastructure, so we can spend more time thinking about the app. And if I was looking at this as we glimpse into the future, could you ever imagine your sort of groundworks contractor arriving on site and they've got no mechanical diggers or anything like that, and they're sort of rather eagerly pointing to 5,000 slaves they brought along to help dig the foundations? You know, if we're really thinking about the cloud, we should be looking at what's available and building on the shoulders of giants. We should be adopting technology that makes it easy for us to concentrate on the stuff that's really interesting. And for me, the real groundbreaker here is no longer needing your own servers. In fact, no longer using servers at all, just standing up bits of code and letting them run. And I've got a number up there, but you know, if you think about how many hours in a month, you know, just how many hours do you actually use a piece of software in a month? And if we could do that, and if we could give you a pricing model that reflected that usage, could we then give it to more people? Could we increase adoption within the construction industry by making it just easy to use and cheap to use? So if you've got someone who's got a few bits of data points to give you, just give them some access for a while. It'll cost you a few pence to process that data rather than many pounds per month for a user license. And then when we've got that sorted out, of course, we can then spend even more time. We've got much more bandwidth to think about solving real construction problems. So how do we get that thing that DJ pointed at, that consistent, repeatable outcome on a project where it's easy to find information? How can we hide complexity for people so that they will use it, they'll try it? And I'm going to show you a case study in a minute called Endura. It's a white label version of our AT Docs project. They've run 40 projects to date over the last couple of years. They've not run a single training course. Of course, a few people have needed help along the way, but there's been no formal training courses. It's very easy to use. And in fact, they've run some projects for Amazon themselves. Because of the pricing model, because of the ease of use, they've been able to fundamentally change the point at which you can use these big, hairy enterprise solutions in on projects. They're now offering something that can scale not just up into enterprise, but down onto any project of any size. And to do that, they've come up with, we've come up with a set of standardization. So we can define what good looks like through templates. What sort of documents do we want, and how do we want to track them to make sure it's successful? And if you templatize it, then it's repeatable. We can use it on every project, and we can mix and match to get any project. Now that gives us three advantages when we do this. First of all, we can stand up a structure at the very start of a project and let everyone see it. And that's great because we get away from the sort of contractors and stuff saying, oh, I didn't understand that, I didn't price for that, I'm not doing that. The other thing is, if you're an end user, an asset owner, or a main contractor, you can take your standards and push them down into your supply chain so that you get a consistent response back, which is really great. And then the other thing, of course, you've stood something up here which is available from day one of the project. And if you stand something up at day one of the project, we can then get the software to go and get the data from people while they're still on your project. So we don't push document gathering and record keeping to the handover stage when everyone's running around with their hair on fire. A lot of the documentation is available, signed off way in advance of the project delivery. And then, of course, you've got this sort of live, living document repository. And that repository we can hand over into the asset owner operator, and they can keep that document live all the way through the life cycle of the asset. The other thing that we've done is we've just followed process. It's very easy to follow the process, and we can target process for different types of document. If there's a design element, we might want the construction team and the client to sign it off. If it's just working from architects' drawings already agreed, we might just want the build team. So again, we can process appropriately for each individual data item, but make sure we're consistently doing it all the time, and then automate as much as possible. The software runs around chasing people. It's constantly checking what's going on. It's constantly checking against the schedule, and it's giving people advance warning of what's going on. And it makes sure that there are no surprises. You don't get to the end of a project, or you don't get to the end of a stage, and someone lets you down, which I'm afraid means that you let the end client down, or the end client is just disappointed. So let's have a look at it in one form or another. The Enduro one is white labeled, and we're quite relaxed about giving people their own instances. People regularly ask me what I do. Marketing people tend to insist that I have some sort of elevator pitch. Most people use this by going to this simple form. They just go along, and it just gives the software constantly throwing out to-do items. Please do this, please check that. So you don't really know, you need to know the structure of the document or the drawing. You've just got something to do, and off you go. So there's not a lot of training. The forms are fairly self-evident. And then someone says, well, what's that? Well, if everyone does that, you end up with a repository. And again, we've got a lot of technology that's doing indexing, it's learning indexes, it's doing searching. It's going through. Now, imagine someone a couple of years ago or 3 years ago asking most of the people who own tall buildings in the UK, what sort of cladding have you got? So that's a real life thing where I'm pretty sure that I wouldn't need to take my shoes and socks off to figure out how many people could do that very easily. And what I tend to do with people is I say, well, actually, you can just do it on a phone. So there it is. You just run through doing that, file listing, what sort of cladding have we got on that site. Here's the data sheet, says all the cladding. What else have we got on there? I wonder what this Kingspan thing is. Yeah, there's a product sheet for the cladding on the building. So it's very easy to do. So we're gathering data, we're tracking data, we're going all the way through looking at it. It's nice, easy structures. This shouldn't look like it's difficult or rocket science. You can only get permission for the products you see, all consistent structures. There's projects running here in the US, Germany, and the UK. These guys have been able to stand up 4 projects since the lockdown, because really you don't need to be on site or on a job site to do this anymore. You can just do it from anywhere, review it from anywhere, stand it up from anywhere. That should look like a fairly standard health and safety file to most people. If I go into mechanical services, there's the mechanical services manuals that are on this site. If I go into plumbing, there's my record drawings. And this is going to be consistent across every manual, so people get very used to the structures. I'm not going to show you anything super secret, but there is, yeah, that's just the outside loo that the lorry drivers probably use while they're waiting to get their lorries delivered, filled up before they make the journey. And of course, it keeps a history of everything that's happened to that document with every version of that document stored away. It's all very, very simple. It's not rocket science. We're trying to make this as usable as possible so that as many people as possible use it. No place to hide though. Everyone sees the dashboard. We can see the status of every manual, where all the documents are, and we can see who is actually holding the project up if they're struggling with the number of reviews or the number of documents we got. So again, we tend to get things delivered. We tend to get things delivered on time because the software is automatically tracking all this. And because the software is doing most of the grunt work, the document controllers are going a bit further. They're managing more than one project at a time, which again is pushing down the price point in the project to the end user or the construction manager. So that's a very, very simple view of AP docs and the data we get. And then we took a big step back from this. So this has been running along for a while. And someone came along a year ago and said, well, that's very interesting, but could you do something along the lines of certification and compliance with this? And we took the opportunity. So I'm showing you the later version of the software now, this year's version. And yeah, so we just built extra workflows. All we did is the same software. It's running the same document template structures. We've just taken the workflow and made it a lot more flexible. This guy here basically looks after most of the welding equipment in most of the large engineering businesses in the UK. If I open the projects, it's a different project structure, much smaller projects. At the time, I had no idea that certifying welding equipment was so complex, but it spits out 1 to 4 documents when you test a machine, apparently. These are the asset numbers for the documents. If I go in here, I can see that document, fair enough, and the same history is there as well, which is fine. But in this particular case now, of course, that history is tied to a document version number. There's the document for 2015, and there is the document there for 2016. The innovation now for this year is we take all of the data in a row, including the version number, and we encrypt it and we put it in a blockchain, which means you cannot change that record at all. If anyone changes it, it would no longer match the encryption. And the other thing we do is we take the record here and the encryption for that record here, and I put it in the next record along here, this one here, which means there's a relationship between these 2 records by a chain, which means I can't insert a record between the 2. I can't come along later and say, oh yeah, I also said this. It just can't happen. And we put that to the back, and it's shared by all projects on our solution, which means it's completely neutral. No one has access to it. It just sits there holding records and chaining them together, which means we've got a completely immutable single version of the truth for all our projects. There is nowhere to hide now. We know exactly what we said against which version of the document, and we know when we did it, which is great, So, and we've been very successful. People get quite excited about that final immutable version of the document. So the last thing I'm going to show you is just a little bit of demo data about thinking out the box, that look into the future. If you think about this stuff where you're serverless, you can pay for when you use it, you don't have to worry about user licenses, what else could you do with it? What other data points could you use? Well, clearly, you know, you can use it to track images, so site progress photographs. Clearly, if you're using drones and things, well, just stick those in as well and put them in the repository. And then you stop and think. You stop and you think, I wonder if we could do it with BIM. I wonder if we could run BIM completely serverless so that we no longer have to pay for a BIM server, and whether we could do that as well using serverless models. And that would be quite interesting, wouldn't it? Sort of, just version I'm in. Oh, hang on. Let me just do something a bit different here. Let me just do it here for a sec. I know exactly what I've done. Well, what if we could just at this point switch on BIM server? It's not a BIM server now, it's a BIM service. And I've now started paying for using BIM. But I haven't been paying for a BIM server for the last 5,000 hours of this month. Or last month. I'm paying for it from now. And I can go through and start to use my BIM. So I can go down, I can do all the normal things we can do with BIM. I can switch the X-ray on, I can drop into the model. Spin around to my half to 10. It's a data point, everything. We're treating data as objects. We don't really care what sort of files we've got. I can switch back on. I'm constantly moving around, moving things, and I can sort of click on stuff, hide things, do that sort of stuff.
This is great, Brian.
There we do. I can identify, if I click on that there, I stand up now the index server. The indexing server will stand up, and that will tell me that it's a Google Pivot Axis bits and pieces. And then just to make my circular part of the last bit of the demo, of course, I can click on the cladding. It tells me what the cladding is, and I can run the same index search from within the BIM model. So I'm dealing with now any data point, and any point that's fully record driven. We know exactly what's going on. For those of you who haven't fallen asleep during my presentation, I'm just going to hint a little bit here. You can see that we can now take, we're announcing this formally next month, but we can update our offline trackers and sheet with the latest history of any document that comes from a blockchain. and the BIM integration, we can take out any sort of data of any type, could be spreadsheets, area extracts. And at this point, this service has gone to sleep. So actually, I've stopped paying for BIM now.
Brian, that's great. That's really great.
Okay.
Can I interrupt you at this point? Is that okay?
You can, if that's if I can just yeah, that's fine. No, you can interrupt. That's okay.
I just think that that's really impressive what you've shown us, and it's the future, isn't it? The way that people will be going serverless and paying for only what they use, and the fact that, and this is going to have a profound it's going to have profound impact on licensing models and the software industry in general. So let's see, Brian, can you stop sharing your screen? Let me share.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get there. It's not playing for some reason.
Yes, share.
Yeah,
right. So moving on to our next speaker, Santosh Bhatt. With over 19 years experience in planning and scheduling across Australia and Asia, Santosh is an independent consultant to projects or organizations looking to improve their capabilities and deliver results through improved project planning, scheduling, and risk analysis. Linear project software was established to provide tools for visualization of linear project schedules. Using industry expertise and his background in management software development, let me say it again. Using industry expertise and his background in management software development, their first offering, TurboChart, aims to make creating time location charts from existing schedule data easy and fast. Santosh holds a Master's of Engineering Management from the University of Technology, Surrey. Santosh, over to you.
Thank you, Phil. Can you hear me? Am I being heard?
You're not really very loud.
Okay.
Something's happened with your mic, mate.
Let me see if I can just adjust
That's
this.
better. I think you're sorted now.
How's that? Okay. Let me share my screen and see if the wonders of technology work.
Break a leg, mate.
How's that?
You're good. You're good.
Brilliant. Okay, let's start. So thank you, Phil, for hosting us at another Glimpse event. This is I think our third or fourth one that we've attended, and certainly the first one that I've managed to be able to deliver from my home here in cold Sydney. So the topic for today is about time location charting for linear projects. So some of you may be familiar with the term time location, or you may have heard this in some other terms like linear schedules, time chainage, location-based schedules, lines of balances, many different names for this sort of thing. What I'm going to hopefully do today is talk to you a little bit about what are time location charts and why we think they're useful for linear projects. We'll cover a quick story, a customer story about a company here in Australia that's adopted our product. And if time permits, we'll do a quick demonstration. Just before I continue, I mean, as I said, this is our third event that we've attended, and I'm just blown away by the technology that's available to our industry at the moment. When I first started, one of the big things was, the technology's not available, and the advances in that area are just phenomenal. And I think the issue now is it's no longer that technology is the problem, but it's the culture and the people now that are preventing a wider adoption of innovation and technology across our industry. That's just I'll get off my soapbox now and continue. So just a little bit about our business, Linear Project Software, or company. So I am one of the co-founders based here in Sydney. I guess I'm the subject matter expert in the venture, and my partner in crime is Russell Johnson, who's based in the UK there near London. He also has 20 plus years of experience in software development and has worked a lot around the project management and enterprise risk type of area. So you may have heard of a package called PertMaster. He was one of the brainchilds of that particular product. So just to put some context into why I'm talking about this, project schedules or programs, if we're using the UK term, but I'm going to call them schedules from now on. schedules are a foundation of good project management, and they're used extensively and for many purposes, as shown on the screen here. They're a planning tool, they're a management tool, they're a communication tool, they're a work tool, they're an administration tool. They get used for so many purposes. They're a very useful and very powerful element of managing projects and project controls. However, when you're thinking about developing schedules, there's a big risk of developing schedules in isolation, or developing schedules by the hero planner, the hero scheduler who knows the answer for everything. This is a recipe for disaster. As the diagram shows there, having that sort of attitude tends to leave people disenfranchised, upset, or feel excluded and left out. Not a good idea. I like to call it's the project plan and the project schedule, and ultimately the rest of the team will deliver their plan, not your plan. Now, I have stolen that from someone, and I'm able to tell you who's that if you want to ask the question. So gaining team buy-in and collaboration for informed decision making is probably the most critical aspect of developing schedules. As I quite said, so they're probably one of, if not the most important factor, is how you communicate the schedule, because communicating allows others to then get involved and introduces them to being able to analyze it. However, when it comes to communicate the schedule, how can we expect them to understand what it says and be able to analyze it when this is what a typical schedule output is? If you've asked to ever see a schedule, this is probably what you've been handed, a pile of paper. If you're lucky, you may get to sit in one of these sessions, like a workshop where someone's scrolling up and down a Primavera or some other tool screen, line by line, row by row, critical parts, work breakdown structures, all those type of terms. This is my career, this is my profession, and even I find this a very boring experience. It gets worse. When asked to deliver a schedule to someone who's not at a desk or hasn't got access to the software, this is what we do. We print out pages and pages and pages and pages, and we ask them to review it, to analyze it, to understand it, and get back to us. It's a recipe for disaster, because it's just not the most, unless you've got a very good understanding of how to interpret schedules and interpret Gantt charts, output like this is not going to be very meaningful. Excuse me. However, and thankfully, on linear projects or linear infrastructure projects, there is an alternative method that addresses a lot of these problems and can help improve communication and analysis. So let's just step back a little bit. What are linear projects? Classic examples of linear projects are shown on the screen there: highways, tunnels, high-rise apartments. Yes, high-rise buildings are linear projects in a way. Railways or pipelines as well, all considered as linear projects. They all share a similar characteristic where there's repetitive works, repetitive sequences of works that progress along the linear element of the project. And they also interact with the more static elements. So that's a key element to think about as well. So linear projects have a very special factor to them. So let me explain that a little bit further. When we think about a traditional schedule or a traditional program, this is what we see. We see a Gantt chart. It has a time axis that runs across the horizontal, and the vertical is usually some sort of a work breakdown structure, some sort of grouping or hierarchical way of organizing activities. You'll see the main features of these charts: single task per line. It's very hard to differentiate one task from another. What does it mean? And you've got very little hope of understanding where things are occurring unless you've got some very sophisticated way of describing activities or grouping and sorting them into clusters. So linear projects have an advantage in this space. So let's look at things slightly differently. Let's continue having a time axis across our chart, so it's on the horizontal axis. But the vertical axis is represented by the location along the linear axis, or the linear alignment of the particular project. So if you think about a highway, it has a start and an end point, which represents that linear alignment. So let's use the linear axis as the linear element as the axis rather than a work breakdown structure. Onto this chart, we can now place all our scheduled tasks or our program tasks. They're no longer limited to being one per row, but they span over the time and the location that we're specifying they occur. We can then use different shapes or colors or styles that represent the actual type of work. So now you've got a much more meaningful interpretation of what a schedule says. You now know what's happening, where it's happening, and when it's happening. So let's just spin it around a little bit. Because the horizontal or the location linear axis tends to be a bit more interesting, we tend to like to look at these charts in this orientation, except for vertical high-rise buildings, but they're a slightly different way of looking at these charts. So this is a typical time chainage, time location, linear schedule with the axes and the activities and the tasks all being displayed. What are the benefits of these charts? Very quickly, you can start identifying work and crew sequences. Where are the work crews operating? Which direction are they heading in? What's their rate of progress? The angles of the lines you see on these charts mean the speed that they're working at. A very shallow line means a very fast operation. A steep line tends to mean a slow operation. We can also pick up things like clashes and errors, where lines intersect or where there's multiple activities occurring in the same space and time. You can beg the question, is this feasible? Can we actually be doing this, or have we made a mistake in our schedule? In which case, you may need to revisit the way that the schedule has been constructed. It's also possible to do schedule comparisons using these type of charts. If you think about comparing schedules, and we heard from DJ earlier on, getting involved in a lot of delay and claims type analyses, you want to understand what was our originally intended schedule versus what are we now able to achieve. These charts can be used for that as well. So that's a bit of background. I want to talk a little bit about, and the main selling point, obviously, all on one single chart and direct from the project schedule. I missed that part. So I want to talk a little about one of the companies here in Australia. Most of our customers at present are in Australia, and a number of those companies are now making the product that I'm going to show you as their standard tool for doing this type of work. But one particular case is a company called John Holland. They have a 70-year history across our region, Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia. They are a tier 1 contracting services. They operate in all types of areas around infrastructure, property development. However, they do have a focus on very highly technical and complex linear infrastructure type of projects. So there's two being shown there from our two largest cities in Australia. There's Melbourne Westgate Tunnel, a huge project that's worth just shy of 7 billion Australian dollars. And John Holland have been involved in the WestConnex motorway and tunnels, essentially about 30 kilometres of tunnels under suburban Sydney. Two specific projects there, multi-billion type of projects, very complex, very technical, very high risk, I might add as well, given all the elements of working in an urban environment. John Holland in particular have I suppose, a global recognition in their rail and tunnelling expertise. They're very well known for the ability to deliver tunnelling and rail projects. Certainly in Australia, they're considered as one of the best operators in this space. And on the screen there is a couple of, hopefully you can see these videos that are playing of two of their projects and operations. So what is it about John Holland's planning and scheduling on their linear projects? So first of all, John Holland's has a very well-developed existing governance system around their planning and scheduling. They have a well-developed set of standards on how to produce schedules, from the full life cycle of their projects. And they have well-developed systems and tools that they use for planning and scheduling. So they're not looking to replace any of that. They certainly recognize the benefits of time location charts on their linear projects. And given that they get involved in so many of these, they do try and encourage all their projects to produce these time location charts. They know the benefits of being able to, again, communicate and analyze programs and schedules using this format. Why TurboChart? Why did they pick TurboChart in particular? Number one reason was they said it integrates with their existing planning and scheduling tool, which is Primavera P6. doesn't replicate, it doesn't duplicate, touches upon a common theme that we've seen across all the previous presenters, which is a single central repository for information. The risk in scheduling is obviously if you have multiple versions of schedules, you run the risk that not one of them is telling you the truth. So the fact that our product integrates with TurboChart was one of their key selection factors. And because of that, it then encourages their programming and their scheduling and their planning to all be done in an integrated manner. It doesn't just extract the linear element and work on it in isolation. It actually takes into consideration design, commissioning, testing, procurement, etc. And obviously with our tool, we provided a cost-effective solution that didn't require retraining or learning in whole new methodologies or any sort of a large IT investment in licensing or infrastructure around that. Just very quickly, an example project, one of these WestConnex projects in Sydney. Roselle Interchange is its name. It's, the picture on the left shows you the construction site. It's approximately 10 hectares with 3 tunnel launching sites. So this particular intersection, or underground intersection as they're calling it, connects up with the 35 kilometres of motorway. Now, the job itself, while it looks very compact, actually consists of about 22 different road-headed tunnels, totaling 23 kilometres of tunnelling in distance. So, and not continuous either. So while it might not seem like a linear project, it very much is so when you think about the tunnelling aspect. So they've given me the okay to give a version of one of their time change or time location charts of their projects. This is a one-pager that was used for this particular project. On this one page, you're actually seeing over 2,500 scheduled tasks, but within the image that you're seeing on the screen here, you can straight away identify the direction that the tunnelings are occurring in. You can actually pick up the sequences of which way the road headers are being used. You can detect when various sites become available, the handovers between the various segments from tunneling to what they call the back-end works, over to mechanical and electrical, and then the commissioning, all wrapped up nicely into one page. And this is now the way that the schedule or the program is now communicated across the project. You can pretty much walk into any of the project offices, and rather than seeing hundreds and hundreds of Primavera printouts laying on tables, you'll see one chart on the wall of everyone's desk, because that's what they use to communicate the timing of all the works. Just some comments from some of their key staff members, I guess. What are the 3 best features of using TurboChart? Helps decision making, provides an overview of their program constraints and logistics, allows them to interrogate and do a quality control on their P6 program. And obviously the third point, allows the whole team to bind in. I love this comment. There is no way the site teams are looking at a detailed Gantt chart to plan their works, whereas the time change does produce a lot more, I guess, elegant way of presenting that. Why did they pick TurboChart? I know a few other reasons. Obviously, as I mentioned, connectivity with their existing software for scheduling. The ease of using it, very easy for their planners to pick up. We've had planners say within a few hours, they've been able to produce outputs and very quickly be able to compare various scenarios. When you're working on these complex jobs, you're often doing a lot of modeling and scenario building to try and optimize the result. Time permitting, this should take less than a minute. Just to very quickly, a quick demo of how TurboChart works. Essentially, we append additional data into user data fields that define what the task represents and where that task is occurring along that linear axis. And we add that information to the relevant activities in the schedule. Using TurboChart, we actually connect to our scheduling data source, in this case Primavera. We map those extra fields and we import the fields in. Then it's a case of then, as a one-off exercise, defining how we want everything to appear. Green lines, blue boxes, each task represents a different thing. As our schedule changes, as we modify logic, as we modify durations, add activities, the schedule itself will change. And obviously that means dates will also change. TurboChart is simply a matter of just saying, just refresh by going and grabbing the latest set of dates. Essentially, we just press refresh, we'll see the dates. And just to see that again and to compare how with a previous version of the schedule. And this is all real time. I haven't sped this up in any way. So that's actually how fast the import and refresh cycle actually works. So just to touch upon the topic of the glimpse into the future, time change charting is not a new phenomenon. It's actually recorded cases over a century ago of this type of method. What we've done is put a modern spin on it to say, let's make it more efficient and let's make it more easier using modern technology. It's a desktop tool for the time being, primarily because most schedulers still use desktop tools, so we connect with their systems. But we do have it's an open-ended technology, can be used for the future as well. We deliver updates over the internet as we're updating the software fairly regularly. It connects with most popular scheduling tools, P6, Microsoft Project, Asta, Safran Risk, Safran Planner, and as mentioned, copy and paste. So that's pretty much my presentation on linear time location charting for linear projects. Anyone's welcome to visit our website for more information or download a free trial of the software. And I shall return back to you, Phil.
That was so impressive. Having been involved with you and Russ for the past year and a half, 2 years, it's been wonderful to see how your offering has developed. It's just really impressed with the development of the product, the increases in functionality, and the way you tell your story. It's a great story. And the John Holland projects look incredibly complicated. So it's wonderful that you've been able to give them something new, a planning and scheduling tool that didn't require the replacement of any other systems, and which gave them value very quickly. And I guess they've been on the journey with you as well.
Yes, they're a fantastic team that thoroughly enjoy the software as well. I could have, unfortunately, because of the sensitive nature of project schedules, often indicating completion and timings of things, I wasn't able to show you some of their more elegant examples. But they're nothing but positive feedback from the users across John Holland saying, I've even had some people say using TurboChart makes scheduling fun. that's quite a scary idea, but I'm glad to hear it.
Now, you had a poll you wanted to run that I don't think we put up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, essentially, I just wanted to understand how many of your audience have used this type of. There we go. The poll's up on the screen now. But who's used this technique before, and how have they found it? Is essentially my question. So, back to you, Phil.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate the support you and Russ have given to Glimpse over the past few years. We're going to wrap now, and I just want to leave you with a couple final thoughts, and it's really this last point here. Please contact me with your customer success stories. Tell me about the vendors that you think are changing the construction industry and making things better. We're looking for the best tales of value being delivered through the introduction of new technology. And it's a different world out there, and we've got to make it a better place. And infrastructure has the promise to fundamentally change the nature of society as we can increase mobility, improve standards of living, feed more people, live more ecologically minded. And technology is a great enabler for that. And I'm asking for your help to find those stories and help us tell them. So with that, I'd like to thank our presenters today, and also Annie and Stuart from Limeslade, who've made this also possible. So thanks, DJ, Mark, Santosh, Rusty, and all of you for tuning in. And have a nice weekend, and we'll catch you at the next Glimpse event. Goodbye.